Hey, I wanted to talk about a blog post I saw today, and it resonates with me a lot because I've seen this firsthand and personally. Antirez is a active member in the startup, co- technology community. I forget what Antirez is known for, but they're very, very talented. I don't know much about them. I just know they've done a lot of stuff. They've made some software that everyone uses. I think they've sold some startup or something. Maybe they made Redis. I forget. But anyways, I think it's Redis. Yeah. 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 Santarez is the creator of Redis. And yeah, he wrote this really interesting post about destroying software. And I'm just going to read it to you and talk about it. Uh, so the post is titled, "We Are Destroying Software." It's almost like poetry, honestly. It rings true like poetry to me. Um, so let's get started here. We are destroying software by no longer taking complexity into account when adding features or optimizing some dimension. We are destroying software with complex systems. We are destroying software with an absurd chain of dependencies, making everything bloated and fragile. We are destroying software, telling new programmers, don't reinvent the wheel. But reinventing the wheel is how you learn how things work and is the first step to making new, different wheels. Hover cars, anyone? We are destroying software by no longer caring about backward APIs compatibility. Yes, 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 yes. We are destroying software, pushing for rewrites of things that work all the freaking time. Oh my God. Yes. Um, we are destroying software by jumping on every new language paradigm and framework. My God, how many frameworks have I learned in the last couple of years that I've never touched once except for once on the project I used it on? All the freaking time. We're destroying software by always underestimating how hard it is to work with existing complex libraries versus creating our stuff. Yes, if you have I'm getting into commentary mode, but let's get back to writing this, and I'll come back and we'll talk about this again. But it's just like poetry, so I want to stop trying to comment and just read it through. Um, we are destroying software by always thinking that the de facto standard for XYZ is better than what we can do, tailored specifically for our use case. Hmm. We are destroying software claiming that code comments are useless. Yeah. We are destroying software and mistaking it for purely engineering discipline. Oh my God, yes. Yes. Software is nothing about engineering, really. We are destroying software by making systems that no longer scale down. Simple things that should be simple to accomplish in any system. Yes. Why do you need Kubernetes to just spin up some trivial service? Sorry, I'm getting commentary mode. It's so hard. I feel so strong about this. It makes me so cross that IT is just so sucky the way it is, honestly. Okay, back to the antirez's post. We are destroying software trying to produce code as fast as possible, not as well designed as possible. We are destroying software, and what will be left will no longer give us the joy of hacking. That's too late. It's happened. It's happened for me, anyways. Okay, so let's talk about this. So, the first paragraph, first line. We are destroying software by no longer taking complexity into account when adding features or optimizing some dimension. Why does NixOS come to mind? Why does the incredibly long, drawn out contribution process of NixOS Nix packages come to mind? Why does um, pretty much any node based framework come to mind? Why does Next.js come to mind? We are destroying software with complex build systems. NPM, PNPM, Yarn, say the least, are all within one ecosystem for one particular problem, that is building node-based projects. And there's other build tools I forgot about, like Deno, whatever. In Python, like how many are in Python? There's setup tools, good old setup tools. There's poetry, which doesn't work with a good goddamn. If you're trying to deploy that software in a existing OS level package manager, just forget it. Poetry is useless for that. Forget it. Flush it down the toilet. Don't even look at it again. It's just useless. You have there's other ones I forgot about, but there's a zillion Python packaging tools out there and build tools. It's kind of funny in a way. C is probably the least awful in this regard. Because what you got is basically just make files, CMake and Mason. And honestly, I used Mason not too long ago. It's really quite nice. It's really quite easy to use. It makes a lot of the modern stuff you see, kind of other modern stuff, like a bit over the top. Let's say put it that way. We are destroying software with an absurd chain of dependencies, making everything bloated and fragile. I did a post about Racket a while ago, and one of my complaints about Racket is you have to essentially pull in the entire Racket GUI and the entire Racket distribution if you want to do any serious work with Racket, because its packaging system and dependency system doesn't have much fine-grainedness with regards to CI builds and to different build environments. So a lot of people would just pull in the entire Racket distribution in their package instead of realizing, oh, I actually want the Racket base. And I don't even use Racket anymore. I wrote that off. It's just not healthy for me to touch that stuff. It's like forbidden fruit. It's never going to become what I want it to be, and it's problems like that that make it the way it is. Yeah, and like, to be honest, the way I use Python isn't so bad, but I'm kind of very careful with packages I pull in with Python. But like with Node, like a lot of my Node modules folders are really massive. This makes me think of, like NixOS and Geeks, in the idea of using an addressable content store, essentially, using a hash of the builds and making everything use its own copy of the libraries for making builds reliable and always working no matter how you deploy it, because it's always going to use the same version of the library no matter what. And this is a great idea on paper, but there's some problems, and especially the disk space and the amount of builds, wasteful build time just to get stuff to build, since it's rebuilding everything from scratch every time. It's like you're vendoring everything essentially, but not really. But you really are just vendoring everything. Okay. We are destroying software, telling new programmers don't reinvent the wheel, but reinventing the wheel is how you learn things work. And in the first step to make new, different wheels. Yes, definitely. I've heard this from a lot of people. I've been tutoring students in computer science, and I've noticed a lot of students are not too passionate, not too engaged in building stuff from scratch to see what it's like, or to take a risk and learn something. You gotta have those guardrails on. You got that Chat GPT, so you do even worse, shittier job than you would if you didn't use Chat GPT to copy and paste some code and just actually understand what your problem domain is and write the actual code you want in the first place. I'm really salty about tech, honestly. as you can tell. Because it could be so great, but it's really not. It's, to be honest, the least of what I want to do most of the time is tech these days. Because it's just, this post sums up my feelings about it completely, or 99% of it, I feel. But yeah, um, definitely heard this a lot before. Um, we are destroying software by no longer caring about backwards APIs compatibility. Yes, 100%. I can't tell you how many times I've had software break because some library decide, well, I'm just gonna just break shit and bump the major version number and call it a day, you know? Which is to say it's not the same library. You know, there's that quote about people, about how, you know, you never step in the same stream twice. You're never the same person. It's never the same stream. Somehow they must apply to these kinds of software where each major release has a breaking API change that requires intervention. And those changes happen like multiple times a year, sort of thing. At the same time, I've seen the worst of this on the other side too, where you just keep APIs because some numbskull who didn't understand what they're doing, who should never have been tasked responsible to do in the first place, was to respond initial, was to design the initial APIs. They just didn't know what they're doing, weren't given the support. So really they aren't, it's not that they were like not didn't know what they're doing, it's just that they weren't given the support. And no one was like vetting their work. And you see it a lot in like big APIs, big legacy APIs. So there's a limit to this, but definitely well-designed APIs are almost always backwards compatible in all cases. You know, like throw like a deprecation warning, you know, and eventually make it like crash or throw an exception or not compile in like a couple years. But you don't have to like break shit every couple months, you know. It's just not helpful. We are destroying software, pushing for rewrites of things that work. Yep, all the time, all day, every day. Um, yeah, I don't think I need to talk about this. This is self-evident. You see it everywhere. All software is like this. Um, we are destroying software by jumping on every new language, paradigm, and framework. I'm a victim of this too with Racket. Um, yep. So I feel a little conflicted about this because, you know, stuff like Racket has infinite potential if provided the right environment to flourish to become a industrial powerhouse, but that's just not going to happen. Um, I have seen this with my friends, like jumping on like new languages just because they're like, well, if I can express myself just a little bit better, maybe I'll be like a more efficient programmer or something. And I used to believe that, and it's totally false. It is completely false. Nothing beats completely understanding what you're coding and using good tools that help streamline your processes and having processes that make sense, like, you know, actually having tests, um, having a life cycle around what you're doing, as opposed to just being, I'm just going to write some code and hope it just works and it's going to keep working in 5 years. Like that's wishful thinking. You have to have a system around what you're doing, or it's going to break because there's unforeseeable things like your dependencies are going to change. You have to manage how they change and affect you as a downstream user. Um, users' needs change over time too. So like you need to systematize it. You need to make it like new tools, new languages, new paradigms, new frameworks are not going to make that any better. You have to systematize how you maintain your software in order to make this better. Better tools aren't going to make you a better developer. They're just going to make you have different problems, such as not understanding these basic lifecycle practices because you're depending on tools to do everything and the framework to do everything. I don't know. I'm kind of becoming a little circular here with that argument. Anyways, moving on. We are destroying software by always underestimating how hard it is to work on with existing complex libraries versus creating our stuff. Yes. Um, it's funny, a lot of times when I script stuff in Python, I use this library called sh. And a lot of times there's also like native Python packages to do it, but they're more complicated, they're harder to understand. And sometimes you just want to run a shell command and just get it done. You know, it's kind of like this. Sometimes it's much easier just run image magic convert than grab some Python graphics library and try to understand it and make heads or tails of it, you know. For example, this is a real simple example. Or just run FFmpeg instead of like using some native API that's gonna maybe you can compile against libffmpeg or something and really make your life a living hell whenever you update your system. Because again, like who knows, you're probably not packaging your stuff correctly because it's kind of hard to because of the package manager and the build system issue described above, and there being a plethora of build systems and all that jazz. We are destroying software by always thinking that the de facto standard for XYZ is better than what we can do, tailored specifically for our use case. I'm not really sure how I feel about this because without standards, we would not have any kind of interoperability. Software wouldn't talk to each other. Then again, this is sort of a moot point given how much of the internet and the software that runs on the internet is becoming more and more sequestered from each other and walled gardens rule supreme. So as much as I love standards, um, maybe it's time to break some stuff. I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about this talking point. I don't think I'm enlightened enough to understand exactly what antirez meant here. But it's a very interesting discussion point. I think it's worth talking about, exploring. We are destroying software claiming that code comments are useless. Any developer who says this, I don't want to work with them, period. They are just bad news. Code is not self-documenting. Code can be mostly self-documenting, but it can never be completely self-documenting. There is always intent lost in the code that could have been expressed in the comments. Why do we have commit messages? Is that because we want to look good? Or is it because we want to tell the next person what we did? So then they understand our motivations, understand where we're coming from, understand what limitations we were dealing with, and all that. Yes, I think it's that. I don't think it's just because we want to look good and just have another step in the development process we don't care for. I think it's important. And code comments are also important. So they're just commit messages that are in the code. Thankfully, many text editors have if will automatically show like the last commit message by each line. That can help to some degree, but um, what happens when you make another commit and the old message is no longer shown? It's still there, but it's no longer shown. A new message is now shown on that line because you changed it. Maybe it's a typo change. Now that line just says typo instead of like some big reason why you did something, some big explanation, you know. So there's limitations to that approach, but I'm just thinking aloud. That's a cool feature of text editor is showing the yeah. Okay. Let's see here. We are destroying software mistaken for purely engineering discipline. It took me a long time to appreciate this and understand this. But yeah, no. The more I work with software and the more I work with people in software, the more I hate it. No, I'm just kidding. There's some truth to that, but we are destroying software, mistaking it for a purely engineering discipline. Um, yeah, I mean, a lot of people are just like, well, either the right way or the wrong way, and I'm going to do it the right way. And sometimes there's a very good reason to do the so-called wrong way. You know, no software system is a perfect modeling of the problem domain. You have to kind of make liberties when you build your software to make it meet your needs. And what is the purpose of software is to improve the quality of living of everyone around us. That is the purpose of software at its core. And also another purpose I found the software that I no longer can seem to gleam as much anymore is it's like an art form. You know, I like building stuff with software. I like expressing myself through the creativity and coding. And it is certainly not an art form the more I use it. And that's for better and for worse. I mean, should bridges be art first and a safe way to traverse a crevasse second? I really hope not. I really hope the engineering comes first because I don't want to lose my life or be responsible for someone else losing their life because I did a bad job. Software is like that. Most software is not safety critical in this regard, but it impacts people's lives nonetheless. So it's important to take into account that what we do as engineers, software engineers, not real engineers, but software engineers, we're not like licensed for anything. We're not a licensed engineer. Um, we are, we have to consider the trade-offs. We have to consider the people. We have to consider the built environment of how we're deploying the software. It's important. There's a lot more that goes into building any software than just writing the software. There's the community that makes it actually thrive, that makes it last more than just when your fingers lift off the keyboard and it starts immediately becoming stale and obsolete, and the APIs that you're using just break. Who's going to fix them? Your community's going to fix them, or your coworkers are going to fix them. They're the people that are important, not the software. The software it's a piece of shit as far as we're concerned. It's not important. It's like an artifact of the endeavor. It is not the people. It is not the resources that make it possible. It is just a means to an end, is my point. Whereas art and software and art, and the way I see it, I don't see it as engineering discipline in that regard, but um, yeah, so things like this make me think I just don't like software development in general because it's not art, and I like to be artistic. I like to express myself. So I kind of have some confliction about this point too because I have my own personal values with how I got into software and coding and breaking computers and stuff. But I digress. It's not really to do with this article. It's just my personal feelings about how I use computers and how I try to make the world a different place, or maybe even a better place if I am so blessed as to have that impact in people. So fortunate. It's really easy to have the wrong impact in people. So yep, let's move on. We are destroying software by making systems that no longer scale down. Simple things that should be simple to accomplish in a system. Like I said, Kubernetes, Docker Compose. I don't know. I stay away from all that for the most part. NixOS. I used to be a strong proponent of many of these technologies, and I've become a lot more crafty and practical about these things. I just don't care anymore. It doesn't matter if it's complicated or not. I just want it to be done and be kept done for a while. And I find if I use these complicated systems, amount of undefined behavior is immense. The amount of poorly documented behavior is infinite. The amount of domain knowledge you need never ends. So you basically become a domain expert just to do the thing instead of just getting the thing done so you can move on with the next thing. And maybe even like do something other than sitting your ass at the computer and get fat all day, which is what I did. That's why I don't do it anymore. Um, so, you know, and what else here? What else we got here? We are destroying software, trying to produce code as fast as possible, not as well designed as possible. All the time, all the time. But there's a limit because in all things with budgets, you have to budget the time against the effort against the ongoing maintenance. Like there's like a bunch of scales to balance. And it's not just a black or white thing. Yeah. We are destroying software and what will be left will no longer give us joy of hacking. I already feel this way mostly. Sometimes I hack on some little things like I was sometimes it's just so I don't have to deal with doing things by hand. Sometimes it's just because I want to um see what it's like. Like I wrote like a fourth interpreter because I was curious what would fourth be like in Golang. Fourth Go, sorry, I renamed it because I think someone has a fourth called Go fourth and Go as well. Anyways, so yeah, I wrote like a fourth interpreter in Golang. I was just like, yeah, why not? Let's even get a awkward license to piss off the corporates too. Let's just look at the code. And there's smells in this. I was just like, I'm just curious what it's like, so I'm just gonna do it. Just gonna give it a shot, define all my binary words, um define all my words basically. Like dot to pop the topmost the fourth stack. This was really fun. And this is what I call art. It's just like playing around. Basically, when I think of art, I think of playing. Just like as in Montessori school as a kid. Or going to a friend's house and hanging out and whatever. You should always play. Play everything. Always play. Unless there's, even like in safety critical places, you can find ways to play and still be safe. You just respect your environment. You respect how you need to handle the environment. Um, there's rules to anything you do. Like this has to compile in order to work. Same goes for safety critical matters. Um, but yeah, always find ways to play. And this is what I call play is I learned how Forth works. And, if I were unwilling to understand and to experiment and to try things out, reinvent the wheel, if you will, I would not have been able to learn how Forth works at a very intimate, basic level. What's another example of something I did like this recently? And this isn't really about me. This is more about just showing that, you gotta try stuff out. You gotta model stuff. You gotta play with stuff, You gotta get those popsicle sticks up and, glue that stuff together. Like I wrote like a little roguelike in Python to see how I would model it in an object-oriented fashion. It was really fun. I had a lot of fun doing it. Um, and yeah, like if I were, that's kind of my point. It's just like, what is my point? We are destroying software, and what will be left will no longer give us the joy of hacking. I got the joy of hacking from this stuff, it was really fun, but that's because I was playing. It's because I wasn't, I'm so far removed from some of the awful toxicity I had to deal with in corporate and in some of the jobs I had in IT. And I'm very grateful that I no longer have to deal with those kinds of people or those kinds of problems. I feel very privileged I can say that. I know not everyone can quit their job like that. Um, but yeah, I had a lot of fun doing this. Um, and I guess my point is like antirez has a lot of good points here. Antirez really knows what he's talking about. Antirez, thank you very much for writing this post. And this is the most important thing about technology to me is if it's not going to give us the joy of hacking, why even touch it? Why even deal with it? Why not just go find a sledgehammer, break your stuff, and have a simpler life where you can actually have fun playing? Um, you know? So, well, if anything, I hope this helps someone realize that it's not just you. Software really is sucking a lot more than it ever has sucked. Um, from like an enjoyment perspective of writing it, and from sort of like a sustainability perspective. I don't know. I think I need to go lie down now and try to empty my brain of this awful stuff that is software. I love software. I hate software. Sounds like family. All right. Well, I don't know what I'm gonna do with this video. Probably gonna upload it because this is important to me, and I feel like people need to know how strongly I feel about it. And I think other people don't really think about this enough. So, yeah, rm-rf/no preserve root. Let's go.